David. Hello, everyone. I haven't got a very nature-themed backdrop, have I? Raw content. Maybe actually that symbolises the shift we have to make from the kind of pure urban, hard approach to design that we've adopted in the past, and then this kind of, I think we've all experienced it during the pandemic and during lockdown. We've all craved more nature, and I guess this is going to become a big theme of what we're going to talk about, is how can we make sure that we put more nature into projects so people feel that they have a connection with nature, even if they can't actually, not fortunate enough to be able to go to the countryside every day or live in the countryside. Thanks for the introduction, David. I'm just going to briefly introduce all of the speakers, or rather I'm going to get them to briefly introduce themselves. After they've done that, we're going to see a little presentation from each of them. So first of all, Ed Hollander in New York. Hi, Ed.
Good morning, or I should say good afternoon for you folks in the UK. Good morning over here from a cloudy, rainy New York City.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ed. Who are you and what do you do, very briefly?
I'm a wonderfully tall, handsome, young landscape architect. That we have a firm in New York. We divide it up between an urban studio and a residential studio. We've been in business for about 30 years. We've always worked on bringing nature into the city, and obviously our residential work tends to focus on the concept of the word home. Home being a particularly important concept during the pandemic, physically, ecologically, spiritually. So this is very close to my heart. With a firm of landscape architects, this is something we've always been dedicated to, and I look forward, to sharing our thoughts and ideas with the rest of you today.
And whereabouts in New York are you? You right in the middle of Manhattan? Are you in a penthouse or a basement, or where's your setup?
I was actually born and raised in the streets of Manhattan. I think maybe one of the few landscape architects that call from here. Our office is right on Union Square right now. It's a wonderful place. We have farmers markets downstairs 3 or 4 days a week. But we're right in the middle of New York City, and it was a wonderfully vibrant, lively place to be, and it's now kind of a shell of that. And hopefully we get through the pandemic and we start to bring some of the spirit back to New York that it has lost.
Well, maybe that will involve bringing more nature back into the city. We can talk about that in a second, but I would imagine that a lot of your clients are among the people who left the city, right, to their bolt holes in the Hamptons or upstate or whatever.
There's no question, as did my wife and my daughter and I. We've all kind of gone off and gotten out of the city, and one of the things for older landscape architects like myself is we've learned how to work remotely. And people are working from their homes and still collaborating on the design that we do in the office. But it's people are starting to return to New York, and it's going to be interesting to see as we work on more urban projects how the thought of bringing nature into the city and nature into the urban context gains importance.
Thank you very much, Ed. Biba Dow is co-founder of Dow Jones Architects in London. Hi, Biba.
Hi.
London's a big city, so where exactly are you in London?
We're in southwest London, in Balham, which is not very architecty, but we like it very much.
But I used to live in Balham for a while, and it's quite suburban, but there's a lot of open green space there, isn't there? A lot of
open space. There's a lot of kind of local neighbourhood feeling, which we really enjoy. And lots of our staff cycle here, and it's well connected, so it suits us.
I think the pandemic has brought home to me how different London is from lots of other dense cities like New York, because I live in northeast London in Stoke Newington, and it is like a village, and I don't go into the centre anymore, but I get everything I need locally, and I've become super appreciative of how green and open London is. I'm not sure whether we could quite call it nature, but it's definitely, there's a lot of space, isn't there? You can leave your house and go and be in a park or in a tree-lined street.
Yes. It's really interesting seeing, so we're between 3 parks, which used to all be connected. And it's really interesting kind of reimagining that as a landscape 100 years ago, I think, when it was much more open.
And finally, back to you, David. You're the only one of the panel who actually lives in the countryside. Well, we haven't spoken to homes, and we probably shouldn't. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your setup. You're in Oxfordshire, right? So you're in the middle of trees and fields and cows and skylarks?
This is without a doubt an idyll. The workshop itself, where we have a fantastic team of about 30 people, is nestling amongst fields. We have no neighbours for about 3/4 of a mile, and the view out of my office is a Bronze Age hill fort. And I'm even lucky enough to have the world's best commute, which is 2 fields to my mill house that my wife and I recently bought. So very, very lucky, very privileged, and an easy commute. The reason that we're here is because I think I certainly am inspired by the nature, by the energy of what's going on around us. And without putting on a sort of a hippie hat, 6,000 years ago, there were people creating earthworks, which are now, as far as I can see, beautiful. So every day we look outside and there's inspiration. In terms of what we do, 25, 30 years ago, I started making sundials on a whim, and I was lucky enough for it to be sold or purchased. And that set us going. And we have been producing sundials, sculptures, water features. But in essence, everything we've done has had some kind of it's been influenced by nature or the bigger picture. It's been influenced by time, a sense of space, reflection, sunlight, nature. So all the works that we've created, both small and corporate, have a sort of signature, which is connecting to, respecting, honouring, or being inspired by nature.
Well, we're all very jealous of your setup there, David. Maybe you can swing your laptop around and show us the view in a minute. But I've asked all of the panelists to give us a short presentation so we can all get a sense of their work, and hopefully their work in relationship to the theme we're talking about, which is bringing nature into design. So please, can you all stick to the time limit of 5 minutes max? Ed, do you want to go first, please?
Sure. Let me see if
you can share your screen there.
Here's my screen, and does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
So this is an image. I thought I'd show a couple of one urban project and a couple of our residential projects. This is the renovation of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. That we've had the privilege of working on with Stephen Hull. And I think the old Kennedy Center is the building to the left, which was what you'd always expected from a performing arts center. You walk into a fairly stuffy building, you sit down next to an old matron who shushes you for unwrapping a candy, during the opera. On the other hand, if you look at what is referred to as the Reach, which is the area on the right, the landscape becomes part of the performing arts center itself. And this is I think a testimony to Stephen Hull's vision and genius, where spaces for performances are inside, spaces for performances are outside. And it is a very different concept where nature and landscape become part of the performing arts spaces themselves. This is the river pavilion here, where they're reflecting pools, they're meadows, they're lawns. You can see people getting ready for a performance. And I think it's a very different concept of the way we experience the performing arts, where it's no longer set within a building itself, but that the landscape and the performance start to blend into a single experience, where we have light, we have sky, we have water, we have we appeal to all 5 of the senses that make it so much more meaningful than just a typical indoor performance in any of the great halls. It just is a different relationship between the various performing arts. And we actually compared a lot of our landscape design and what went on here to the movements within a symphonic piece, if you will, where there are, and the seasonality of the landscape actually becomes part of the performances that go on within this area. At a different scale, a private home, I think as David referred to it as a bolt hole in the Hamptons, or Marcus for where clients go to escape. And I think the thing which we've seen in the pandemic is the sense of home has created, it's a much stronger sense right now. Home is family, home is safety. Home is where people are now living together, they're learning together, they're cooking together. Multi-generational families are now together. And where these, I think in many cases before, were houses, they were country houses, they're now homes. And the spiritual nature of home becomes a very important part of this. This particular project is one where we moved for David, for us, Bronze Age is 1730 in the United States. So there was some architectural renovation, there was new construction, there was modern construction, but the sense of creating places and spaces where our clients can be together as a family and enjoy things, where there are sensory experiences for people. There are places where people are invited to walk together, to talk together, to experience the seasons, the light, the smells, the sounds. Landscapes are all about life. And if one thing that we've learned from this pandemic is that we better enjoy life today, because I think we all see the value of what there is to have. And maybe we appreciate smelling a flower, seeing a butterfly, feeling the breeze, all of the things that nature does to the soul. And the benefits that nature has to the soul, I think, have been amplified by what we've seen in the pandemic. Finally, one more different kind of space, the idea of where we're creating more contemporary elements that fit within a pastoral or more natural landscape. So our firm tends to work with architects as contemporary as Stephen Hole, as traditional as Robert Stern, and everywhere in between. And occasionally we even have the joy of working with wonderful sculptors like David Harber to enhance our landscapes with some of his beautiful sculptures, as well as his wit and wisdom. But it's really a joy to be able to create spaces where people call us up and say, you have done something wonderful for our family. You have made a place where our family can come together, where they can be together, where they can enjoy life together. It's about love, it's about life. The one thing we always say to clients when we first accept a commission is the one thing that we always insist upon is there has to be joy in the work that we do. That it should be a wonderful place when it's done, but the entire process should be joyful as well as the results. So I think that's, hopefully, David and Marcus, I got that in within my allotted 5 minutes.
Very well. Do you want to unshare your screen now then?
I will unshare my screen.
Thanks very much for that. I should have said at the beginning, by the way, to all the participants, if you want to ask questions, just use the Q&A function within Zoom. And if there's time, I'll get around to asking your questions. But quickly, Ed, in response to that, are you finding now that your clients are asking for you to include more nature in the project? I mean, obviously, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford a big place in the Hamptons, it will come with a bit of land. But that land doesn't necessarily imply nature, doesn't it? There can be landscaping schemes which kind of obliterate any kind of biodiversity. Are people saying, I want more butterflies, I want more bird life? Are they more aware of what nature is?
It's something that we were encouraging even prior to the pandemic, but the thing which we found remarkable is that people were now in their country homes, whether it's in the Hamptons or any other place, is they were calling me up in April saying, there are cherry trees here, they're beautiful, because they'd never been there when the cherries were in flower. So I think for people who were essentially urbanites to have been forced out of the city into the country, it has changed their perspective. We always had the perspective that nature was wonderful and beautiful and giving of all life. But to take people who were essentially urbanites and now putting them in the country, I think they have gained an enormous appreciation for what nature does for them.
And is nature something, we're talking about nature and home, can nature be in your home, or is nature something that you step out of the door and experience there?
I mean, we live in nature. Even in New York City, you look out the window and there are still clouds and sky and birds and things like that. In a lot of the bigger development projects that we're working on, we push the developers to have people kind of come into a building through a garden, to have gardens part of the architecture itself. So that even if you don't have a terrace or a penthouse, or that your experience of coming from the urban fabric into home is through a garden. Because entering that garden, I think, changes your metabolism. You come out of the stress of an urban environment into an area of garden and nature and safety. And I think that sense of ecosystem that you enter does wonderful things for the soul. And most of the builders and the developers that we're working with in New York City are very much buying into this. And I can think of almost all the projects. I was just on a call with Taiwan where we're doing 5 towers, and the entire center of this complex is a 3 or 4 acre garden, so that people come out of the city through a garden into their homes. And I think that changes the entire experience.
Maybe that's one change that we're beginning to realize has been a product of the pandemic, is that we always used to talk about house and garden, home and garden. And maybe it sounds like what you're saying is people are beginning to realize that the garden, the outdoors, is part of the home. The home doesn't start when you cross the threshold.
No, we always try to say on the private projects that we work on, that we think of the entire property. How large it is, that's your home. Within your home, there may be buildings, that there may be architecture. But I think we're trying to change the view that architecture came first and landscape second, to the idea that we are all collaborative, and that we're all, that home is not just inside. Home is outside as much as inside. And that's what really gives spirit and life to the home.
Great. Thanks so much, Ed. We'll be coming back to you later. Biba, do you want to share your little presentation now, please?
So I'm going to talk just about a few projects that we've finished recently, which address this theme of landscape. The first is the Garden Museum in London, which is housed in a church that we've extended with 3 bronze pavilions around a cloistered garden by Dan Pearson. And what's been important there is making a public garden that is open to the local community as well as people visiting the museum, and connecting a cultural organisation that's focused on gardens and horticulture with their own space in a building that previously had a very kind of disconnected relationship to the garden. And then another project we've recently finished is a building in Cardiff for Maggie's Cancer Care, which is a drop-in centre for people being treated for cancer at the local hospital. And it's meant to be very much a kind of home from home, which is uplifting and which is part of feeling, empowered with how you address the troubles that you're facing. And part of that is through design, both horticultural garden design and architecture and furniture. And then domestic projects. So 2 projects which are both homes for people who work from home, but one is new build and in the countryside, which is this one on the Isle of Wight, which is a home in a former orchard, and all of the rooms wrap around different parts of the garden so that you're connected to nature and you're aware of light at different times of day depending on how you use the different spaces. And then in Tanner's Hill in Deptford in South London, a little 17th century building that we extended around a courtyard to make a gallery and studio and home for a couple, where the use of courtyards to drop light into the very narrow small house was a way of extending the space and connecting it to its surroundings. And I think that for us is the most interesting thing, how to find a characterful architecture which connects people to the place they are, whether it's rural or urban. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You came well within budget there, Biba, in terms of time. So you showed a museum, a public building, a cancer care centre, which is a kind of health project, and a private home. So quite a range of different client types and building types there. Same question to you, are you finding that clients are more interested in incorporating nature into projects now? Obviously, those projects have already happened, so that must have been part of the brief or the conversation a couple of years ago. But is that conversation becoming increasingly important now?
I think what we're really conscious of is how people are aware of spaces that are adaptable, that they can work from, and also spaces that bring people together. Because I think one of the really striking things was our needs as a society to connect with each other, which made lockdown really hard and which changed society. And I think, you know, parks were so full, those public spaces, landscape spaces that allowed people to relax and also to interact with each other became much, much more important. And I think finding spaces, designing spaces that allow private life to happen comfortably and flexibly and adaptably is incredibly important. And equally, finding the spaces that bring people together.
And all three of those projects, the nature isn't inside the building, but it's very much connected with it. There's lots of views, there's vistas, there's courtyards. You managed to chop the garden up and drop it in various places around the project. And with the Maggie Centre, the Cancer Care Centre, did you look into kind of therapeutic reasons why a view of nature is beneficial? I mean, does contact with nature, or even just simply the sight of nature, make people get better quicker, or at least lessen the pain of the illness they're suffering?
I think that's absolutely, definitely true. And Maggie's do work a lot with landscape designers as well as architects, so it's very much part of their ethos. But yes, we wanted a place where even if you weren't able to be outside, you could be looking at the garden, whatever the weather and at the changing time of year, which I think is incredibly grounding and invigorating. And there's all kinds of research about how physical contact with the soil has a physically beneficial effect. So I think all kinds of contact with plants and landscaping, smell, sound, as well as sight is incredibly important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll be coming back to those points later. And finally, David, as the host of this series, you have the honour of going last. Tell us a little bit about yourself and fire up your work and fire up your presentation, please.
Okay, so the presentation's just coming. A relatively checkered career, 5 or 6 different full-blown career paths ranging from mountaineer, cameraman, thatcher, and I stumbled upon being creative with my. I saw a sundial. I became completely obsessed with it. It wasn't so much the metalwork and the engineering, but it was the relationship between something that we created and time. So I was obsessed with the elements, and time effectively being an element in my eye. I was also very sort of smitten with the effect that the sculptures had on people. I mean, one case in point was an extremely stressed, busy captain of industry who had 3 minutes for an appointment with me, and it rolled into 2 hours as we discussed time, and we watched time slip by, and his helicopter had to be redirected. Another piece we've evolved from making sundials and time. We started creating sculptures and water features. Again, always trying to be inspired by or acknowledge nature. This piece in particular is called an orbis, and it's inspired by seashells or a revolving season. It mirrors the environment. It's meant to be something very calming, very relaxing, and I say it's what goes around comes around. It's a reassuring piece. We've then got another piece here. This is a piece which we're just about to dispatch to your side of the pond, Ed, and it's essentially a drop of water. So it's again just trying to create a physical impression of something very elemental. And I guess this comes back to all human beings are recognizing and understanding the sort of the smaller details. Some of our pieces are made up of metal which look like leaves. This piece is meant to represent, as I said, a single drop of water, albeit on a gigantic scale. And it's referencing our fundamental need for nature, the things that are around us, and acknowledging and being nurtured by the elements. And I mean, this is just the workshop. And I mean, as I said earlier, we're very fortunate. We have a fantastic team of around 30 people, but all passionate about what we're creating, referencing nature. This was a particularly poignant one. It was, I was fortunate enough to be commissioned by the Freeman Family Foundation for Hyde Park. There hadn't been a drinking fountain in the Royal Park for about 30 years. And we wanted to make a meeting place, a piece of sculpture, and the bronze inlays in that stainless steel are meant to draw our eyes up to the sky and the tree canopy above. And there was a whole raft of reasons that this worked. There were low level, high level. It was even designed so that your horse could drink from it if you were cantering through the park. But that's the kind of thing, coming up, meeting a challenge, but also referencing the nature that it's all about working with nature and being inspired by nature and the nurturing, rewarding elements that you get from that.
Thanks very much, David. A question. Presumably when you're having discussions with clients, the first thing you do is you go to the place where they're thinking of having a piece. Is that right?
Absolutely. Well, whenever possible. I mean, it makes the job so much. I did a site visit yesterday, and we had a preconceived idea of what was going to happen, but by seeing the site and engaging with the client and discussing with them what their world was about, their world had changed completely. As Ed was saying, people aren't working from their office in London. They're sidestepping. They're now working from home, whether it's in London or in a countryside situation. So that the importance of what we're trying to put there, and this is relevant to the architecture as well, is that it now becomes home and work. So the sculptures are there as not a distraction, but they're there to embellish the environment. But again, the mirroring of the surfaces is about bringing light down and reflecting there are no vapor trails at the moment. So the sky is infinitely more beautiful than it's ever been.
Did you ever go to a site and say to the client, your view is perfect, the last thing you need here is one of my sculptures getting in the way?
I have done that. It's the challenge is to come up with something that is going to enhance the environment, and there are occasions when the environment is just so perfect. Commercially I'd like to put something in there, but aesthetically I can't think of anything that is going to work, so I'll have to walk away. But of course, irksome when you go back later and discover that they put something ghastly in its place.
But do you see yourself in the tradition that stretches back thousands of years, really? I mean, there's the English landscape garden tradition, which is putting objects in the landscape to enhance the landscape, to subtly change the landscape, and often to provide vistas from which people can appreciate the landscape. Do you see yourself as part of that tradition? No. I mean, no formal training, so that doesn't really register. What I see is I'm creating something which it's almost like a talisman or a totem within nature. I mean, nature is incredibly important to me and the pieces that we're creating. Nature is very important to me. So the piece might reflect nature, it might show nature, it might mimic nature, and that's the bit that works for me most. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to ask all of you a question, and you can answer. Let's answer them in the same order that we did the presentations. As designers, what is nature to you? Is it something that is separate from design? Is it something outside of design? And can you actually design nature? Is nature something that can be controlled, or that can be sort of let in or not let in? What exactly is it we're talking about when we're talking about nature? Ed?
Well, I think one of the problems that human beings have tried to make over the thousands of years is we've tried to separate ourselves from nature and try to assume that we're better than nature, that we are above nature, that we can control nature. When I think people that find true happiness realize that they are an infinitesimally small part of nature, but we are all part of nature. And nature and landscapes and light and sky and fragrance and trees and flowers are really what give life meaning. And we can enjoy all of the arts and all of the culture, but that it is our interactions with nature, whether it's in urban settings or in country settings, that bring a spirituality to life. That if you think of the moments when you are at greatest peace and greatest joy, whether you're alone or with your family, it's when you are in a place that gives your soul peace. And these generally tend to be in places of serenity, of beauty. You don't think of walking down, I will say, Times Square in New York or Trafalgar Square in London and saying, isn't life a wonderful place? If you're sitting on a beach and a butterfly is on a goldenrod and you hear the sea in the background, you can feel your blood pressure lowering itself. So I think that one of the things the pandemic has done, if there's ever going to be any benefit of this, is that it may have reinforced the importance of nature in the daily lives of all people.
But what do you mean by nature, though? Is nature wild stuff, or is nature any kind of living thing that we can put in a pot?
Nature's not just plants. Nature's also the wind and the sunrise, and the fragrance of butterfly bush, and listening to bees, and watching birds and listening. The number of people that have called me to talk about listening to birds since the pandemic started is remarkable. I never knew the birds are beautiful. It's like, yeah, that's because you sit inside an air-conditioned house with the windows closed and something on the stereo. Go outside and appreciate what's there. And I think that's what's changed. So nature isn't, to me, just a tree, a flower, a grass. Nature can be birds flying by. Nature can be clouds in the sky. Nature can be the sound of the wind.
That's a good point, and similar to what you were saying earlier about one of your clients suddenly really realizing they had cherry trees. I think during lockdown, even people like me in London were thinking, oh my God, there's more birds than before. But actually, there weren't more birds, just I could hear them, I bothered to pay attention to them for the first time.
You weren't racing to the tube to get to a job. You were sitting outside in the garden without much to do. And all of a sudden, the songs of the birds, and you could hear them communicating with each other. And at times, I would sit we have a house out in the country in Sag Harbor, and I'd sit in the garden and listen to the birds and almost want to join in the conversation.
Thanks. And over to you then, Biba. Same questions. What is nature? When you talk about nature and combining, somehow working nature into a project, what do you mean by that? Is a Dan Pearson courtyard garden, is that nature, do you think? Or is that like humans kind of controlling nature?
I think for me, it's very much about, in a sense, it's the antithesis of design, that whether we're designing sculpture or landscape or buildings, we are shaping something raw, and that raw thing is nature. On the other hand, I think the nuance within design is how to connect to a wider context, and it's that wider context which is meaningful. It's our connection with where we are and how we live our lives and the people around us, and we feel that through a wider perspective, whether it's a physical one of buildings and enclosures, or a temporal one of seasons and weather. And for me, the important thing is thinking about views and windows that open, and pocket gardens if there isn't space for a big one, but anything that's about connecting you to the place outside that is part of what grounds us in our communal lives.
And for me, one of the most interesting movements of the last few years is the kind of rewilding movement, which is basically saying that for too long we've tried to dominate nature, we've tried to control it, and in agriculture that's meant pesticides and pollution and things like that. But if you just leave nature to sort itself out, it looks messy to the design trained eye, but it encourages an enormous amount of biodiversity, and nature can sort of heal itself. Is that something that you've heard people start to talk about in terms of an urban context or a commission context?
I think it's really interesting, and I think it kind of feeds through our idea of what nature is, and sort of adjusts our frame of reference for what things should look like. It's like the sort of impact of the railway sidings as a kind of nature conservation zone, because nobody can go in them, and yet when you go by in a train it looks chaotic. So I think it's a kind of a sort of welcoming of chaos, of raw nature into our lives. You know, the buddleia that grows out of a crack in the pavement.
And as an architect, is your instinct to kind of hack down the buddleia and replace it with
leave the buddleia, don't hurt the buddleia
in a nice planter? Or are you happy? Would you be happy to let like a corner of one of your projects be somewhere where nature can just do its damnedest?
Absolutely. And interestingly, in our Maggie Centre we work with Cleve West, and it was a very contained site with not very much space for either building or garden, and we kind of borrowed a neighbouring garden, which is an empty hospital next door with a lot of mature trees, and put our building under it so that we have sort of a slightly amplified site. And the garden at the back there under the trees is very rewilded, you know, and it's very much about Cleve cut down thinnings and made nests for creatures, and it's very much about sort of seeing something that's quite intimate, really, because it's not very shaped, and I think that's really interesting.
There was a very interesting project by a designer called Julia Watson at the Rockefeller Center. I think it's still there, actually. It was a temporary rewilding of the Rockefeller Center Plaza, where she put some planters in that tried to replicate what the wildlife would have been like in New York before it was developed. So grasses and flowers and things like that. And apparently has attracted back butterflies and insects that would have been native to that area. David, the projects that you showed were all in kind of beautifully manicured landscaped gardens, but do you work in wild places as well? Have you put a sculpture in a kind of a jungle or a windswept moor? Have you done a sort of Eduardo Chillida, that amazing sculpture in the Basque Country that I've seen, where he stuck a sculpture on a kind of cliff over the sea?
No, I've been lucky enough to put some sculptures on cliff tops in California, on mountain tops, not on the sides of mountains in the Alps, and in fact in the desert in the Middle East is. But the piece has to then relate to to the environment, where there are constraints in terms of the materials you're putting in there, but also what's it going to do? It can't be. A lot of my pieces are not about having an ego for the piece. It's the piece interacting with its environment. But I just wanted to go back to a couple of things that were mentioned earlier about how nature nurtures us. I mean, I'm making water features now that are inspired by the very gentle eddies that I see on a stream near my house. So and Ed, you were saying, Ed, that it's nature is everything. It isn't just. I mean, holding up a leaf and looking through the leaf is spectacularly inspiring for a piece of sculpture. The way the veins and everything and the chlorophyll, but also, a wisp of wind over water, or I mean the cliche of the wind traveling over a cornfield. But I have to say the whole lockdown, the whole COVID thing, tragic as it is, hopefully has just rekindled. It feels like we've wound the clock back 80 years. People are back in touch with some of the more fundamental things, like walking within nature, being calmed by nature, being reminded It's too easy to forget how influential it is on us, and we've let it go. We've busied our lives with cars, tarmac, work, phones, technology, and aspiration. The reality is, when everything else fails, the one thing that's going to be there to support us, to nurture us, to revive us, is nature. And sitting by a stream for half an hour is priceless. And the fact that the stream now is reflecting a beautifully clean sky, the birds are in better voice because of the lack of pollution. I think this is something that we all need to remember. And if we can incorporate it in what we do as people who are hopefully setting examples of design or whatever, that's going to be a very, very powerful tool for the future. It would be tragic if we ignored this wake-up call.
It's interesting you talk about water, because apparently the biggest thing you can do to encourage nature in your own garden, or even on a balcony, or even if you've got like a small little garden that I have, is to put some water there, because then frogs, dragonflies, damselflies, all of these kind of creatures will miraculously find water. We haven't got much time left. I want to ask this question openly to all of you. Feel free to jump in as you like. We've mostly talked about incorporating nature into projects for private clients, civic projects, museums and things like that. What about people who don't have a garden? What about people who live in a tower block or in a basement flat or in a room of a shared house? How can design, how can cities, how can we help them to experience nature if it's not in their own personal space? Does anyone want to chip in with a response?
Part of cities are the cities are where people come together. I've been involved with a group called the New York Restoration Project in New York, which is really focused on creating spaces where people can come together in underused urban areas. I think people's connection to nature doesn't have to be within their apartment, but when you bring them outside, giving them a place where they can experience green and they can grow some vegetables and they can hear things. It doesn't have to be individual. Cities are always communal places. People are now 6 feet apart when they're in these communal places. But I think giving people the opportunity to come together in parks and other open areas in urban environments may be more important than anything else we do.
Yeah, I was some of the things I was thinking about when preparing for this was what we have done, what's been achieved in the urban situations like that. And one of the two things that sprung to mind was, one, the incredible vessel, the High Line and Thomas Heatherwick's vessel, which creates a sort of a beautiful sort of emotional journey, seeing an area of New York that was prior to the Hudson Yards quite run down. But the High Line in New York is just a priceless piece of inspired sort of urban planning. In the same way that we had the Garden Bridge project, which tragically didn't go ahead, but that would have been a shining example of how you can bring a sense of calm, a sense of nature, nurture back into the heart of a city. But we are, as Ed said, any small amount of greenery or space, it is nurturing. You can stand under a tree in a very busy street, and that alone, and the bark of the tree or the tree canopy of the tree, or watching the tree from your window blowing in the wind, is rewarding and nurturing in itself.
Yes, even if you can't get to a park easily, it can be as simple as growing herbs on your windowsill.
Yeah.
Got some questions. I'm going to go through as many of these as I have time for. Well, this one's maybe a bit of a hard one to start with because it's aimed at you, Biba. Roger Heath Bullock says, may I ask Biba if developers designing housing estates are really trying to bring nature into their designs or just maximizing on the space for financial gain? I guess what he's saying is that people talk about integrating nature into places, but is there really a desire to do that when if you give some space to trees or whatever, that's less space that you can sell?
Well, I mean, it's quite a, I can't speak for all developments, obviously, but I think that there's much more emphasis now on what's called placemaking, in terms of acknowledging the wider environment and the connection between buildings and their neighbours, and the types of amenity spaces that we're designing, which I think is massively important, and for, you know, the public good, that there are different sorts of landscaping spaces that have such a massive contribution to play to the urban environment.
Marcus, let me jump in on that for a second also, because I think what we see, and maybe it's just because we get hired to work on these, is that developers are understanding the financial value of bringing nature into these things. It's not either or right now. The fact that you can devote space to gardens and amenities and nature within their developments actually increases the amount of money they're going to make. So maybe there's actually a win-win in all of this.
Yeah. I think there was a King's Cross development, which I think was 90% Argent. And I believe it was very inspired because they introduced quite a lot of green spaces that were open to the public, not just those using who were part of the development, right down to the extent that there was a natural swimming in the middle of King's Cross, which is fairly inspired.
Yeah, there's a trend towards natural swimming and people wild swimming. There's a river near me in Hackney that I never considered to be of any kind of interesting natural appeal whatsoever, but it's become like the seaside in London in the summer. There's hundreds of people paddling and hanging out on the banks and things like that. We've got a question from Teresa Conway, who is gardens editor at Homes and Gardens magazine. Oh, I was talking about homes and gardens being separate before. Thank you so much for your presentations. My question is whether this theme of nature has translated to the materials you're working with in your various fields. Do people want more natural materials, or do man-made work just as well with a natural landscape? Does anyone have any specific examples of particular material which are becoming more popular with clients? And I guess in a way this refers back to when we asked the question, what is nature? And I think Ed said that, and David said that nature is the wind and nature is the sky. I mean, is nature a bit of wood? Is nature a kind of a wicker screen? What about materials? Is that nature, and have you seen people calling for more natural materials in projects lately?
Materials are definitely nature. I'm thinking of projects we've made using bricks local to the site, you know, where the colour of the earth is the same as the colour of the bricks, and I think that's an amazing way of connecting to nature.
Yeah, we're using, well, 20, 30 years ago, I restored a piece of sculpture and decided that I only wanted to make sculpture that was going to last generations, if not millennia. So everything we do is made out of durable materials. That kind of precludes sort of hemp, hessian, cotton, and twigs. But we are still referencing nature in the materials we use. And as I said earlier, we're trying to mirror or mimic nature. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than a tree reflected in a piece of crisp, clean stainless steel. It's the tree that is the beauty. So that's how we're trying to do it. I mean, it would be lovely if the stainless steel had a zero carbon footprint, but unfortunately, by the very nature of it. The good news is it will be there for thousands of years and therefore not recycled or chucked in a landfill in 10.
You will outlive all of us then, David. And actually the next question is from Matthew Biggs. Says, David, we have talked a lot about your work set in beautiful landscapes. How do you intend that the impact of your wonderful sculptures should change the atmosphere in more sterile urban areas? The question is, could you use the same approach for kind of a paved plaza in a city or a motorway junction or something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, we do. We put them in airports and hotels and you know, difficult sites in the center of cities. Again, it's just using what's around you. And if the piece of sculpture can bring the sky down to ground level, and everybody is suddenly aware that the sky is beautiful there in front of them, albeit reflected, that's the joy of it. Or textures and tones. Some of the pieces we make it's the shadows that they create on the ground. So the ground becomes the the painting, the beauty. And as the sun moves around, the shadows morph, change, and whatever. And they become stepping stones, playthings for children. They're jumping in and out of the shadows, turning themselves into leopards because of the shadows, spots. So even in an urban environment where there is no apparent nature, you can still reference it and harness what there is.
Okay, this is oh, sorry, were you going to say something then, Ed?
No. I love listening to David.
So here's a good provocative question to end on. This is from Chris Young, editor of The Garden magazine. Really useful talk, everyone. And Ed has summarized the role of nature so well. My question is, do you think we in the design world have collectively failed to date because people are only seeming to respond to nature now with this pandemic? Shouldn't nature have been integral over the years to our developments, homes, and lives?
Well, only God can answer that question, I think, but
Not on the panel. So
it's his fault.
I think we've all been working with nature. We've been aware of it. I just think the situation, the lockdown, the COVID, everybody is now appreciating, really appreciating the importance of it. They're waking up to it. So we've all been designing with that in mind. In our different fields, but the public are suddenly becoming aware of it. Everybody you speak to is saying how glorious the sky is, how beautiful the birds are, how clean the air is, and taking time to enjoy the park that's near them. That it's our job to carry on our designs, acknowledging and respecting and developing that. But there has been this massive wake up, and this is the thing that I'm so concerned that we carry on. We've learned something. We've been woken from sleep, and we need to harness this moment, because we could fall so easily back into the nonsense of 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
5 months ago.
I think that all our lives were paused, and I think that it's so important to remember that some good things have come out of it, which is an appreciation of things that we have. Whether it's being aware of where things come from because it was harder to buy food and things from the shops, or more time to appreciate, as you described, small pleasures like birdsong and trees in the wind. It's making sure that we hold on to those good things whilst embracing getting back to as much normal life as we can.
If there can be any benefit from the tragedies of COVID and what it's done to so many people, is the possibility that it may rejigger our relationship to nature and to each other, and to value people, and to value nature, and to value life, and to value beauty, and to value joy. Because I think that's really what nature equates to, is joy. And if there is something good that can come out of this, perhaps it will be the fact that it has given all of humanity a chance to reset and to appreciate the simple pleasures that nature, that trees, that wind, that birds, that smelling a flower, that watching a butterfly can provide. You don't have to be a captain of industry to appreciate watching a monarch butterfly feed on a piece of milkweed. You don't have to be anything other than a human being to be able to smell a flower and say, doesn't that give my soul richness? And if some of that can come out of this, then maybe there's something good that's happened.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to summarize with a few takeaways, and I've written down a few here. The first one that came up with is, home is not just an interior. Interesting point that the concept of home encompasses outdoors as well. That you don't go through a door and enter your home, but the natural part of your environment is part of your home as well. It's part of your home as well. That nature can heal, and that's been scientifically proven. That people was talking about how plants have been used for therapeutic processes in healthcare projects. nature is not just plants. In fact, we talked about nature being the wind and even natural materials, and there's all kinds of ways of incorporating nature beyond having living creatures amongst us. There's been a separation from nature. I think that's what the last questioner was getting at, that throughout the history of civilization, we've increasingly put nature as some kind of other, and maybe the pandemic is a wake-up call to make us realize that division is not only unhealthy but actually dangerous, given that the pandemic came in the first place from a wild animal whose habitat had been encroached upon. And finally, as my personal theme at the moment is, let nature be wild, that nature is not something that should be designed, but the more we can allow nature to do its own thing, the more biodiversity there is, the more we'll all benefit from it in the long run. Thanks so much for such an interesting discussion to David, Biba and Ed. Thanks for the questions, and thanks to Nina and co for organising this, and especially to our audience, our participants for watching us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, everyone. Stay well.
So I just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us. We wanted to, I suppose, conclude and say it feels very much as if the common ground here and from some of the comments that are coming in is that it's really that we're inspired and that nature is definitely a powerful force in everything that we're doing, and will continue to be so. So next time we'll be back with Marcus. Thank you again. Still Chief of Design, edit of the and come to the Changing Landscapes talk on art in October. So in the meantime, thank you very much. Join the conversation at #ChangingLandscapes. But in the meantime, I hope everyone is keeping well, continuing to stay safe, creative, and importantly inspired. So thank you one and all.
Thanks, David. And maybe we can all meet up in your garden at some point instead of this
Well,
Zoom thing.
come and watch the dragonflies.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.